computer. Right, Paul, it's 22nd of April. Talk me through 22nd of April 2016. What was the day like? How did it start off?
Oof, it was horrendous. The day was horrendous in many ways. It was I'd come out of treatment a month before and not fully got the idea of recovery, and thought I had a lot of things sorted, and I ended up I was actually away at the time, going back about 2 weeks before that. I was in Barcelona. I went to watch Noel Gallagher over there, and ended up, drinking again. And that was a catalyst again to set me off on another binge. And it was 10 days later that on that day, the 22nd, that I finally, my body probably started packing in. And it was just horrendous. The day before, in complete despair, and not in a real horrible place of not wanting to drink, but this kind of compulsion and powerlessness over what was the drug of my choice, I guess. And I remember in the morning my mum coming round, and it was like I wanted to stop, but I physically couldn't. And I needed to change my environment, so I went up to my mum's house, and I remember there were a couple of cans of Carlsberg, I think it were, and this is like, this is like, I'll never forget this time. It's like 11 minutes to 11 in the morning, and something in me, I rang the treatment centre. I rang Sporting Chance and I spoke to the guy down there, and I said, I've cocked it all up and I'm here again and all that, in the victim place, I guess. And he just said, listen, he said, give your head a wobble, put it down, get to a meeting, and if you wake up tomorrow and you've done 24 hours, then you're as sober as I am. And he's obviously not drunk for 25 years, and it kind of just gave me the nudge that I needed, because I was doing stuff that I didn't want to do at the end of the day. And I remember pouring that drink down the sink and looking at the clock, and something inside me, I just knew that was going to be my last drink. And then I had one of my friends the day after came and picked me up and took me to a meeting, and I could barely speak. I was just managing to get there and get sat down, and it's absolutely horrendous, and the physical elements of addiction coming out and all that stuff, and yeah, it's a horrible place to be in, and don't know what it was. I don't know whether it was a mixture of just having enough of it, desperation, call it the gift of desperation in addiction. But I know I'd been through stuff previously, but something was different with this. I just knew the game was up, and I was full of fear around that, because I felt like at the time I was walking away from a life that of only that I knew how to act and behave. So there was a glimmer of excitement, and I mean a glimmer, but full of fear, full of dread, it was horrible, absolutely horrible.
So you went through rehab. What led up to that? Why did you want to go to rehab? Was it a difficult choice to do? Had it been a long time coming? What started?
Yeah, well, it was, I'd tried for years to control it, and as much as denial is a huge part of any addiction, as I know now, but as much as I tried to deny it, my behaviour was not acceptable in many areas of my life, and a lot of that fueled around drinking, so and the consequences were stacking up. You know, they were. I'd lost a lot of interest in stuff that I were excited about, you know, and it was knocking onto my family and my children. And the more that your actions knock onto the people that you love most, particularly for me, my children, the more the shame builds. And that's the cycle of addiction. The more you drink to soothe the shame. And obviously, you're not aware of the shame at the moment in time because you're drinking to get away from those feelings of shame. And of course, when you get a few days ahead of you and you haven't drunk, you think that the next time is going to be all right. You think that you're going to control it. You think that, you know, it won't be as bad next time. If I just stick at 6-7 pints, it'll be all right, you know. And it took me a long while not to go into rehab, that I knew it wasn't the 8th or 9th or 10th or the third aftershock or sambuca that did it. It was the first pint, because the second that chain had started, it was very unlikely that I'd stop, you know. So a mixture of, you know, behaviour and being sick and just tired of being in that constant cycle, you know. And the addiction aside, you know, I'd suffered the depression going alongside the huge amount of loss there that I can relate to now looking back. You know, and it's quite easy for me to kind of pin that on football and coming out of it, but I don't think that's the full story of it. You know, I had a relationship, a marriage that broke down very early on, partly down to, you know, my actions and the way I were behaving. And you know, I got to a point where I had to look at myself. I was running out of options, you know, and I didn't, and I got to a point where I just genuinely didn't want to be here anymore. I couldn't see a way out. You know, the thing that I'd used pretty much all my life to enjoy life, to mask feelings, had stopped working, you know, and is actually becoming extremely damaging. And that was a very, very terrifying place for me to be in, you know, and it was hard for me to accept that, and it was hard for me to ask for help and to admit that there was something that was wrong, you know, and I you know, I wanted to find another way, but it was terrifying, absolutely terrifying.
When you realised that you had a problem, did you ask for help straight away?
I think I've always known that I've never drank safely, you know, but I covered that up with a lot of arrogance. I created there was a persona that, you know, I thought was me. I guess it was at that time, that, you know, this is the way that I am, and kind of this is the way it is at the end of the day. But that ran out, like I say, I ran out of options. And so I've always recognised that. I remember about 7 years earlier going, you know, someone recommending going to an AA meeting, and, you know, I went to the meeting and I thought it was really good. I got a lot out of it, and I respected a lot of the people. It wasn't what I was expecting, the people that were there. And I remember them giving me a book, and I came away and give it to someone else and said to them, you know, it's not for me this, but maybe this will be something good for you, you know. And it was 7 years later, after, you know, a failed marriage, losing my license, nearly losing my profession, and losing one of my children, that I crawled back through the doors, you know. But I weren't ready back then. I had a lot more learning to do, you know. I weren't desperate enough, and that's a difficult thing with addiction, you know. It's you know, when the consequences aren't there, you know, we carry on because we think it's going to be all right, and we become manipulative in our behaviour, and we frame things how we want it to frame. So unfortunately, there are some people who do get in and stick with it before the consequences aren't that stacked up. But it's usually when, you know, when it's dire straits in most cases, and even then it's not enough for some people to give it up. You know, you can sit in front of an addict and tell them that the liver's going to pack in 3 months' time, and they'll just smile and walk out, you know, and that's how strong it is. And that might be really difficult for some people who maybe haven't experienced or suffered on that side of it, but that's how strong it is. You know, it's a force.
There's a switch, isn't there, with people who are addicted to whatever it may be, but there's something that happens and they literally can switch overnight. And what do you think it is? Like, for somebody that it would be going through addiction now, what on earth can they do? They might know that they've got a problem, but what do? Just sit and wait and hope for it to click in?
Yeah, well, that won't happen because it's recovery, and spirituality is it's a verb, it's a doing word. It doesn't just hit you on the head. So that myth needs expelling. I don't think I'll ever be able to put into words or quite just do it justice what kind of spiritual awareness, awakening that comes with it, or what the switch is. What I do know is that the second that I asked for help internally, never mind the kind of going out, it was a year before I actually started kind of getting into doing this stuff, and I mean internally, it's not something that needs to be externalized. It's an inside out job, like most, mental health, addiction. The second that I wanted, I admitted to myself that there's a problem, and I started to ask for help internally, that I couldn't do it anymore. My life started to change. They say that, a small ray of light lightens the darkest room, and that's how I can relate to that. There was a glimmer, and hope is everything. It's absolutely, we only need one little ray of hope, and human nature can take the rest out of us. But addiction, spirituality, like gravity, there's this pull. There's nothing you can feel or touch or see. It's an energy, and there's a compulsion that forces around addiction, and it's the opposite that gets you out of it. But you to plug into that, you have to be vulnerable, you have to be willing, you have to be humble, you have to get on your knees, and you have to ask for help. It will not hit you round the face, and what I know from my experience, and I know from millions of other people's experience all over the world that seem to share a similar story, is that the second that you start asking something else out there, whatever's driving it, as we've seen now with this pandemic, we're not in control. As much of scientific knowledge, that clever we think we are on our arse in days if something out there more powerful. I don't mean that God's dictating this. I mean the universe. I mean stuff, the energy that goes on out there. Whatever conspiracy theory or whatever you want to pin on it. The bottom line is there's stuff out there that's more powerful than we are as human beings. That is a fact. Because we're on our arse at the minute, and we're trying to scramble to get out. We will get out of it. There's no two ways about it. And it's the same thing with addiction. The second that we start asking for help, I spent all my life thinking that I could do everything on my own, and that I only needed myself. I made those decisions very early on in life, and they served me very well early on in life, but they became outdated the older I got. So I had to invest in a new way of thinking, but you can't even straighten out thinking until you've straightened out spiritually, thinking in a different way. So it's hard to put into words. It is a switch, and I know the program, the 12-step program, one of the most enlightening things for me, step 9, I think, was going out and saying sorry to people. What an empowering process that is, to take responsibility for your actions, and to, not, I did this because you did that. That's not apologizing. It's something along the lines of, I acted inappropriately, and I'm sorry. And, I'd like to put it right if I could, if I can. And you connect with people at an intimate level, and relationships in my life have healed beyond where I could ever imagine them healing, as you know.
Yeah.
But I don't know what it, there's a, if we knew and we could capsulate it and put it in a capsule and a pill, then, but the world doesn't work like that. It just doesn't work like that. But our actions and our intention is everything, and I've not met a person yet that's not willing, who's handed it over and set upon that path and given it over fully, that's not got well.
You talk about what life was like before, and you've touched on a couple of things that kind of did happen back then, but what was life back then at the deepest, darkest parts of it? How bad was it? What were you like? What was everything like around you? Like, now we all kind of know you and see you as this, as a person in recovery, and you've led such a great life for the last 4 years plus. That what was it like back then? What was it that you were experiencing that you needed to get away from?
Despair. I couldn't look myself in the mirror. You know, I didn't like the person that I'd become. The front, or the arrogance, you know, wasn't reflective of the feelings that I had underneath it. You know, I've come to learn that, you know, that denial and arrogance, self-righteousness are the great ways we protect ourselves from underneath shame. You know, and I was carrying a lot of it. You know,
why?
And probably, it's a good question. Probably because I was hurting people, you know, through my actions, through how I was behaving, unintentionally at times. You know, to be fair to myself, it wasn't actually going out. It's a very selfish illness. You know, very selfish, very self-centered, and you know, so there's a lot of that in it, and felt criticised, felt judged. Whether that was all in my head or was true, probably a bit of both. You know, I think there is addiction's not just centered in the mind of the individual; it runs into society and, you know, and everything else around it. And it's that, you know, it's a big contributor to it. I think criticism and judgment is one of the biggest fuelers for it, you know, in society. But it's a delusion as well, of course, because I'm also not that important. You know, people have got their own things going on in their own lives, and problems in their own lives. You know, nevertheless, what's kind of happening in Paul's world. But nevertheless, this paints and builds a story. You know, there's vultures that come on the, you know, they kind of hang around in the rooms and stuff like that, and you perceive that the criticism's there. You know, and when that kind of parent gets strong in you, you know, a drink is the perfect antidote for it, because, you know, I guess that's why it's so addictive, because it bloody works when you do it at the time, or whatever you choose to do, you know, whether it's drugs or overworking or shopping or whatever. You know, it disarms the parent and it soothes the anxiety in the child within you, you know, so it works. The problem is you come out of it and you're left with a problem that's 10 times greater than it was before. So yeah, it was I think it's multi-layered. I don't think it's just in the here and now, or even going back a few years ago. I think coming out of football, I lost an identity. There'll have been shame around that, a huge amount of loss. You know, never really able to replace that feeling of being part of a team. Yeah, recognition. You know, I was somebody, you know, part of something, not on a massive scale, but doesn't matter. You know, you're playing football day in, day out with a group of people, and but there are a lot of people that come out of football and don't go down the path that I did. So I think I've been carrying a lot of guilt and shame from earlier on in my life, as well. You know, so I think it's multi-layered. I think the foundation and base for any addiction is abandonment and rejection. You know, and I think we've you know, I think where AA probably, if there is any missing keys to it, it deals a lot with the spirituality, and it's an absolutely amazing program. But you don't necessarily get to the foundations of stuff. That's my opinion. Obviously, people may argue with that, and that's fine. So yeah, I think it's multi-layered. It's very sophisticated. It's never just one thing. And I don't know, it was, you know, there's a mixture of things at the time. You know, I think the other thing for me, being in a profession that I find very hard, is that you're also perceiving the loss. You feel like you're not investable, or you know, people will look at you. That's that judgment I was explaining before. it's a fantasized judgment in a way as well, because I'm thinking, well, if people kind of think that or they know that, then I'm not going to have a job, and I'm not being what I think the world outside wants me to be as a person, which is this kind of, have this persona and be successful and all that different stuff. And they were never my aspirations. They were never, not from a healthy place. So you kind of put a front on and you put a mask on, and you go into meetings and you kind of hang yourself up on your real self at the door when you walk in, and you sit and then you pick yourself on the way out. And I've had to relearn how to be as a human being. The last 4 years, I've had to learn how to be a dad. I've had to learn how to be a man. I've had to learn how to be a partner. And I'm daily learning all those 4 things. And I do all right most of the time, and other times I get it wrong. And the difference is now I hope that I've got some capacity to accept when I'm doing things wrong or notice it, and set about drawing learning from it. But I don't get it right all the time.
You're doing all right. I'll let you have that. How long do you think, though, that it went on for? Like, how long do you think that you were addicted for?
That's a very it's a difficult one, because when clients ask me, or people say to me, do you think, what is addiction? The Gabor Mate's definition of addiction is the one for me that really encapsulates everything, and that is, it's any behavior. So it doesn't necessarily mean alcohol or drugs. Any behavior that is done for a pleasurable outcome that subsequently has a negative impact on the individual's life, and whereby the individual keeps returning to time and time again. And I love that. I think it's absolutely great, in how to sum up, might not have got that right word for word, but something along those lines. So, I was doing it in my 20s, but it was acceptable back then, and I was going out, and I might go out for a couple of days or whatever, and be once every 6 months, so it wasn't, although I was kind of drinking excessively, it wasn't causing too much, grief in my life, but it still wasn't great, you know what I mean? I think where it really started to turn a corner was when I was having issues with, a daughter and my ex-partner, and I just felt out of control. I felt like I had no options. I weren't playing football anymore. There were no training. I'd not had that focus. I was working in a different profession, and I'd then become my own boss, which meant I had no one to answer to. And it wasn't a very good recipe. The structure of my week and my days were my own, and that I wasn't responsible enough or mature enough to have that privilege when I look back, and I was very, very nearly lost it. And I think that two years really, it really kind of turned a corner, and I started really noticing, that this ain't right. There've been times before that, and I could kind of brush it off as like, well, yeah, kind of, it's part of growing up and stuff like this. But that starts to wear out when you get to 34, 35. Do you know what I mean? You're not in your 20s anymore, and what used to be funny, kind of isn't funny anymore. So, but then you're left with this kind of, so I know how to do, what to do, what to do. So, I can't ever really remember a point where I thought, I'm addicted, or this is where it is. I think I've always known along the way that I've never drunk properly, and I think if it is a problem, if it causes a problem, then it is a problem. It's straightforward as that. And I have this, many times people go, well, yeah, I can leave it. I was like that. I could not drink for 2 weeks. I could drink sensibly for a week. I could have a bottle of wine, leave it. I was a binge drinker. But then catch me at a moment when I'm kind of down there and I'm drinking on that, and then I just go into a different realm. All bets are off. And the bottom line is what happens when you drink. I know now why I don't drink now, and it is a choice, because I could go out, you know, I could go out and have a few pints. The world wouldn't end. It'd be all right. I know that. But I couldn't 100% guarantee where the night would end. And I could probably 100% guarantee that in 6 months or 12 months, I would end up back on a bender. And for that reason, it has to be taken. It became black and white in the end. It became maths in a way in the end, because it was like, if I go out on a night, it's 2 hours of enjoyment, then 2 or 3 hours of enjoyment, and I can't really remember what goes on after it, so you can't class that as enjoyment. And then it could lead into 3 days, and then I'm either clearing my shit up afterwards, or I'm apologising, or my head's up my arse. So it's, you know, it's just not worth it for the 3 hours of enjoyment, you know. But this tells you that it's not going to be that bad. It paints the picture of a nice glass of red wine in front of the fire, or, you know, the camaraderie with the lads in the pubs and stuff like that. And, you know, for that 2 years leading up to it, I were drinking on my own. I wasn't partying. I wasn't, you know, I wasn't away with people having fun. I was fucking drinking on my own. It was sad. It was a sad state of affairs. So I don't know. You know, I don't know at what point. I know. You know, I think physically, you know, and mentally, it's a very vicious cycle that you get in with it. It's very destructive to self, but also to people around you. You know, and ultimately, those people, the people that you care about most in your life. You know, and you might think, well, if you care that much about them, then why do it? You know, and I totally get that. Totally get that.
Not as simple as that, though.
Eh?
It's not as simple as that, though.
It isn't, you know, it isn't. If it was as simple as that and there a switch, you know, there's so much more subconscious stuff that comes into it. You know, I know there's an element of my character that's self-sabotage. You know, drinking's perfect for that. You know, messing stuff up. You know, it's kind of like, you know, if you kind of got a programming to try really hard and get reward for it, then why not keep blowing things up so you can keep trying? If you're successful at something, then you're not going to keep trying, are you? So it sounds daft, but you know, these things are staying us from early life stuff, you know, and maybe at some levels we think we're not good enough, or we think we're not important, you know, we think that we have to be something, or we're on a pedestal, or we're not good enough. You know, we keep trying to fill those gaps to feel okay in the world, you know, and so it's a sophisticated illness in many ways, and the paradox to that is it's also a very, very simple one, and if you can find the black and white in it. And I used to think, I remember sitting down when I was drinking and seeing people in a pub or a cafe drinking a coffee and thinking, how are you doing that? How you know, it's kind of envy, you know, and I admire that kind of control. And I used to think everyone drinks on the planet, you know. And then after the first few holidays, I went to Kenya for 3 weeks, did some work over there, and then, you know, went on holiday and didn't drink, and went, you know, in an all-inclusive and didn't drink, and the power in you just grows. You know, you mature every time you get the wins. You just grow, you know, and you become more powerful than whatever was driving it before. And, you know, I look around and the majority of people don't actually drink, you know, they don't in my circle anymore, you know, and you'll know that from us here when we go out and stuff like that. And I guess that's what happens. When I came out of treatment, there were literally probably 1 or 2 people in my life, you know, the circle of stuff around you. You know, and you set on that path, and you know, and I committed, and I were all in, and that willpower and that kind of stubbornness that nearly killed me, because I didn't want to get beaten by the drink or the system or whatever it is I was delusionally fantasizing I was fighting, which I was, you know, I was only fighting myself in the end, but I was in a fight with something. When I kind of made the decision, I put all that tenacity into recovery. I put as much energy into it as I did into drinking, and luckily I'm here to tell the story, and and set about it, you know, and the path after where you know you've been a big part, you know, a lot of that yourself, from seeing that other side of it. But you create a new environment for yourself, which I think is absolutely essential. You know, I think
you did create a new environment, a pretty big one. What is it? What drove you to do that, and why?
I don't think I can't. It's difficult to answer that, Rebecca, to be honest, because I think once I've got about 3, 4, 5 months in, you know, I felt pulled to do the psychotherapy. I had absolutely no clue whatsoever about counselling and psychotherapy or that world. Didn't have a clue. It was the guy who I worked with through the PFA that said, I was going to do one course. He said, well, I kind of won't bother with that. Go and look at that. So I went over there and looked at that and signed up to the 4-year postgrad. I wasn't controlling anything anymore. I was just trusting my intuition and trusting what was going on out there, you know, and I've got rid of all the shit. So I was on a clean slate, you know, I can tell when I'm chasing something now and when I'm just being pulled to it, and the two different things, and I still struggle with that sometimes, as you know. But you know, I got into that. I went and I wanted to do something, so I went and did a triathlon. I raised a bit of money for. I then, you know, went to that evening do and met Lily, who I'm now married to, and we connected. She were going through you know, some struggles on her side of it, and we just ended up together that night. We had an idea of creating a centre to do some psychotherapy and do, you know, some holistics and some yoga stuff. Never really envisaged where or what it would do. It was just enjoyable, and you know, it's just been, our relationship's grown, and the centre's grown alongside that. And you know, it's no coincidence. It comes from that, you know, that decision to hand it over and to gain the courage to look at yourself and be vulnerable and accept that you haven't got all the answers, you know, and there is another way, and listen to people who've been there before and get the guidance, and put people around you that genuinely care. And you know, we've not recruited anybody here. When I really think about it, the people that have come and gone are people that we've kind of, you know, gone and asked to come, and it's just not worked. You know, and the people that have come and stayed are people that have just naturally levitated to what we do, because we're on, you know, there's a similar connection there for whatever reason, and a mixture of different things. And you know, there's been times over the last few years where there's been struggles with stuff, and there's, you know, the people around us are a massive support network for that. You know, they are, and you get it, and that's the point. You know, you get it back. It's not about going out and trying to save the world, and it's never been about that. You know, it's just been about trying to do things in a different way, and try and add value, and try and be better, and try and add, you know, improve stuff. Because at the end of the day, we're hardwired. You know, we're born for growth. That's part of our DNA. You know, and I think a big part of me was dissatisfied because I knew I had more potential than what I was doing in my life. And I think at some level inside me, there was part of me that's going, this isn't enough. Like, there's more here. There's more. You know, I remember in my 20s doing exams and stuff and like passing them. And then, you know, it was getting to a point that I couldn't concentrate on what I was reading. You know, and so we're kind of dropping back a bit in that way. You know, and the last people say, how the hell have you got the time to do what, you know, kind of doing the psych and still taking exams in the IFA? Well, you know, I've got like another 60 hours a week to myself that I'm not drinking or my head's up my arse. So, you know, I'm in control to as much as I want it, as much as I can be with my situation, and the rest of it, obviously, I'm not in control of, but of my life, you know. So there's so much gratitude in there for that, and I'm just feel so lucky that I'm not you know, I'm not chained to that life anymore, you know. And it is a life. It's not just the drug, it's the culture, you know. That we've got a massive drinking culture where we are, you know, pubs. I've spent loads of time in them, And there's some people that respect and admire what we've done, where I am, and there's others that fucking really don't like it. You know, they just don't like it. And I get that, you know, because it's threatening a belief in what their culture is. And you know, that's okay, you know, as long as people are okay. And you know, the centre's just grown from that, really. You know, so I feel grateful for the people that are involved with it as well. You know.
Have you? Would you say that you found it difficult to stay on the right path at any point?
I've drinking is. I have no compulsion to drink. Yeah, it's quite a profound statement for me to say that. I could never imagine life without drinking for as long as I can remember. I've learnt new ways of managing myself when my emotional state is suffering. But I have got no compulsion to go out and drink, and I don't think that I hope it's forever. I'm not daft enough to think that it will always, you know, that's something that I should take for granted. It's something that, you know, I have to look after myself. And that's why I was saying before about the shame and how important values are, you know. And I know we do corporate work with people, stuff like that, and we talk about values, and it can kind of be this thing that you just kind of throw out there for a bit of marketing, but it's not for me. It's fundamental, you know. And if you live your life and work out what's important to you, to other people around you, and you stick to that, I'm not going to feel shame again. Do you know what I mean? And I'm less likely to drink. So sometimes, you know, it's hard because actions at times, and you feel drawn to stuff, and sometimes you might take towards the edge of it. But you know, hopefully, if you can work on yourself enough, you can just stay in that path. You know, and like I say, you know, I feel that strength inside me. I feel strong, you know, and that only comes from a spiritual foundation. And I'm not kind of someone that levitates off the floor. I don't mean that. I mean just being connected in here, you know, is self, others, and the world. You know, that's. And if we've got that, and we've got that intact, then, you know, when the bad weather comes, we stand it. You know, we stand it. And the beauty of that is that's something that we can all work on and develop and understand and progress. It's not something that we've got or we haven't got. That's what recovery is. It's recovering. It's finding it. It's a finding process. You know, it's not something that's not in you, because every single person's got it in them. You just got to get to it.
What's the biggest lesson that you've learned?
There have been quite a few. The biggest lesson that I've learned is that you know, whatever goes on out there, or whatever people, or you may think people want you to be, or what the world wants you to be, that as a human being, you know, I'm enough without any of it. You know, it doesn't define who I am, what profession I do, what awards you win, what or don't win, what it just doesn't matter. You know, stripped right back to the bones. As a human being, I'm enough. You know, and there's times when I don't feel that. There's times when I struggle with it, and there's times when I challenge myself on it. But if I could find that acceptance and find that understanding in it, then, you know, everything should be okay.
What advice would you give to somebody now who thinks that they may have a problem or they want to seek help, what would you say?
Do the latter. Seek it. You're not on your own. There is another way. When people are in that state of despair, what's very common throughout it is we feel trapped in here and they think there's no other way out and nobody else on the planet is going through it. Very similar to depression, very similar to any really related mental illness that goes alongside it. Again, the word shame keeps coming up because it's a massive part of all of it. And where words fly, shame can't survive. As soon as it's outed and as soon as we get into that intimate space with another human being, there is no drug or pill on this planet that can replace human connection at a deep level. Not one. No vaccination, no pill. Doesn't work. Two human beings sat down going, I get it. I'm sorry you're feeling like that, but I'm glad you've told me and I'm here. Nothing touches it, and that can then lead to a passive collectivity with other people that have been in a similar situation. It's the sad story of addiction sometimes. There is another way. Like I say, and I don't say that for 1 second, for anybody that's struggling, that's trying to get it, that can't get it. It's a time, it's a process. And we fail time and time again in life, Rebecca, as parents and as therapists and as advisors, whatever we're doing, but the way that we get through it is staying consistent, sticking on the path, and trying to make amends and go back and do it right. That's the essence of what our value is to other people. We're not going to get it right every time, but if we invest in consistency and stay on it, then we'll get through it, and an invitation to people to find, search themselves and find that hope in them and find that spirit in them, because it is in them. You're born with it. It's there. We all have it, and it's the greatest source of power that we all have if we can be humble enough to brave enough to look for it.
So what's the future for you, for us?
I don't know. I don't think past 2 weeks. I don't know.
You do.
That's up to you. I don't know. I don't know. We've gone through we've do you mean me personally, or do you mean us as an organisation?
Everything. Yeah, you personally, the organisation. What you want to do.
Me personally. I think the pandemic saved us in a way, because it was like all stacking up. The next workshop, the next thing that you kind of say, yeah, I'll go and do, and it's given a real good chance to reflect back. And I'm just coming to the end of the first phase, the four year of training that I'm doing. I've signed and agreed with my sponsor to go on and do the next stage of that, which will be to get the certified certificate. So professionally, I'm going to keep studying and keep learning. I don't think I'll ever stop doing that. I'd like to, the 4-week course has just been phenomenal. What we've put together, I want to do more of that. And for me, where we are now, we've had a collective kind of pulling in, haven't we? Restructuring here. We're not a restructuring, but we've just had taken a necessary step back in. And do you know what? We're blessed to have so many good people here, and the people that we've got here, I just want to solidify what we've got and take it forward. I've got no grand plans of going and doing, weird and wonderful things. It's about being content and happy, and that all sounds great, doesn't it? There'll always be a part of me that's yearning to get forward. I appreciate that. That's something that's always knocking about. But I want us to go forward. Of course I do. I think you have to. I think that you can't stand still with stuff. And if you are, then you're not in the flow of life, are you? Because everything's constantly changing and moving and growing and dying. So we've got to go along with that, as we do it. And I'd like to see us continue to do more group stuff. You know, do more of the 4-week course. I'd like to see us work with more organisations. You know, and I'd like everybody that's involved here to get what that's always been about, that what they want out of life, and to do that collectively, you know, and take it forward. You know, like we've got, like I say, you know, it's about people taking it forward now.
Cool. So if there's one, because you obviously in our office you are famous for your quotes. So if there is one that you can leave us with, final words.
Putting me on the spot, aren't you?
Yeah.
Putting me on the spot. Well, the one that's been there right from the start, Rebecca, that success is
to do with foundations.
Yeah, it certainly has. That, you know, we can all define what success means to us, and there's a formula for that, and that is if you build a strong foundation and you have a clear intent.
There it is.
And then you're clear on what your success is, then, you know, then it's there for us all, you know. And like I say, the values are our foundation, just like a tree has its roots. You can't see them, they're in the ground, but they make it stand up in the bad weather, you know. And we have to go digging sometimes to find what's going on in the roots. So build a strong foundation and have a clear intent, and all will be well.
Thank you, Pauline.
Thanks, RJ. Take care.
Bye.